Hey guys, welcome to the Check-In podcast brought to you by the Awaken Nights podcast network. As always, you're joined here today by your host, Caleb Hansey from Awaken Church Wollongong, and we're in for an awesome podcast this week. We're joined by not one, but two guests from interstate. We're going all the way to Victoria for our two guests here today. And joining me for the first time on our podcast, we have the Honourable David Simpson. Say hello.
Hey everyone, how you going?
Hey, good to have you, brother. And we have the majestic Dan Powell joining us all the way from Geelong. How you doing, Dan?
Good, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's so good. It's so good to have these guys. I thought what we'd do going forward with a couple of these check-in podcasts from now on is what we're going to do the next couple of weeks is we're going to get a different couple of youth pastors, young adults pastors, even senior pastors from a couple of my relationships that I have. And what I want to do is I want to talk about some topics that they have gone through, what they're currently going through. And maybe for some people that are listening out there, and it maybe is in a ministry role, it maybe is in a leadership role in the workplace, these are some things that you can actually be helped with by chatting to them. And so we're going to get to them in a second and they can introduce themselves and you can get to know them a little bit. But what we're going to be talking about today on the podcast is maneuvering or working through a new leadership role or a new ministry role you're going into. And so both of these guys in their own right have gone into a recently new role in their leadership or ministry. And so we're going to pick their brains a little bit, talk about it, be vulnerable, be real, and leave you guys with some advice that you can walk away with. But we might start off with Dave. Maybe just say who you are, your age. If you're single, I just want to throw that one in there. And then, the current church you're working at, where you're located, all that kind of stuff, just so people can get to know you.
Yeah. So, I'm Dave. I live in Melbourne, kind of the northern part of Melbourne. I'm at Uni Hill Church and, I oversee youth and sort of like media, if that really kind of counts, like website and that sort of stuff. So, I oversee that and I'm 21. I am single. Thank you.
Ladies from Wollongong, listen up. You need to hit this. No, just keep going. Sorry, I apologize. Keep going.
04, no.
No, wait.
So, I've lived here now for just over a year, about a year and a quarter. Previously lived in Queensland. So, I love it. Love living here.
And how long, you said you previously lived in the Gold Coast, which I know, so how long have you been doing the role you're in? You moved
a year and a quarter, pretty much moved and kicked off. And then, from then until now. So,
Awesome. Before you're in the Gold Coast, I just have to mention this because we actually do have a couple of Bendigo listeners and they're going to be horrified that you left that off the drawing board there. You originally were in Bendigo, correct? You were born in Bendigo. Bendigo. Born and raised, Bendigo is one of my top cities in Australia, mate. Don't be letting that off the.
Yeah, I grew up most of my life in Bendigo, so shout out to Bendigo. It's holds a part of my heart for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm technically I'm a Bendigo boy. Yeah.
Shout out to Pizza Hut Bendigo, all you can eat. Brilliant, dirty, disgusting. Say no more. But awesome. Thanks for coming on and I hope the listeners get to know you a little bit more and the viewers on YouTube. I'm going to kick it over to Dan Powell right now. Maybe just talk about who you are, introduce yourself, where you're located. Just so people get to know you a little bit. Go for it.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm Dan. I'm 22, recently non-taken. So sorry, ladies.
Oi!
Go hit up Dave and you'll be all good.
Off the press.
That helps me, actually.
So I oversee the youth at Waterfront Christian Church in Geelong, which I hear is the Wollongong of Victoria. So
very true. Very true.
We're already vibing on that same level with Awaken. I've been in the role all of term one, so it's been the longest 10 weeks of my life. I've been through a national pandemic. I've seen it all, not quite, and it's been awesome. I actually grew up at the church at Waterfront, left for 3 years to study at uni and was at Resound Church, then 1330 in Melbourne, and served under Mitch Smart. Shout out Mitch, you're the man.
Shout out Mitch, come on the pod.
Yeah, for sure, get him on. I was under him for 2.5 years. It was awesome. And then got the call up to come back home and head up the youth ministry. It's been an incredibly insane 10 weeks, but it's been awesome.
Awesome. So you'd almost say, you said you grew up in Geelong, you moved to Melbourne for uni originally, is that right? You moved to
Yeah.
Melbourne for uni, moved back to run the youth ministry. So it's almost like you married your high school sweetheart. You're back, you're in each other's arms, you're there. It's brilliant. It's fantastic.
First love.
It's a bit of a Taylor Swift song, you know, we're a bit off and on, and now
Yeah,
we're on
wow.
again.
I didn't think we were going to squeeze a Taylor Swift reference in this
Let's
podcast.
go. And any 22 as well. So shout out that one.
Yeah,
well.
maybe
Shout out to my girl.
maybe it isn't there. Maybe it isn't the only Taylor Swift reference we'll get. I don't know what your answers are going to be, but go for it. But yeah, awesome. And I have been to Geelong. I went there. I'm going to lose it in a second. I went to Geelong. I think it was there last year. Yeah, in August. I preached at a event. Was that Dave? Yeah, you guys were both there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know I keep saying this about cities that apparently people think people don't like. I did love Geelong. It was actually a great city, and you're right. It does feel very much like Wollongong. The culture was very similar. The city was very similar. The fact that on Sunday morning when I walked out to get a coffee from my hotel, there was me and a homeless man on the street. That's all that was there. Was absolutely very similar. So yeah, Geelong was awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to get straight into it, and I might start us off with Dan actually in the first question, and then Dave, you can kind of jump in and talk about it. So as you guys both mentioned, you both jumped into a new leadership or ministry role in the last year and a half or so, and Dan only being 10 weeks that you're in it. So what I want to talk about for some of the listeners, maybe you're going into a new full-time ministry role or a youth ministry role, or maybe you're heading up an ushers team or a hospitality team in church, and you kind of need direction on what the mindset is. And so what the question I want to ask is, maybe if you can just shed some light to the viewers or the listeners on what was your mindset going into the role? What were some goals you had? What were some strategies you brought? What were some things that you were worried about? Because I think we often don't talk about that. We kind of just get real revved up and like, yeah, come on, like ministry, leadership, I love it. I'm going to be the best that there ever was, which is fantastic. But we don't sometimes talk about like what we're scared or worried about for the role. So do you want to maybe shed some light on that, Dan, and just talk into that for a second?
Yeah, for sure. I think we said like you go into ministry and you're pumped, you know. I've been waiting for this for years, you know, or maybe not years, but years, like my whole life had it prophesied over me, and you know, you're waiting and you finally get this opportunity, and you're pumped. And for me, the biggest thing with my mindset is like my head is just straight like huge, like, you know, we're going to be the next Rich Wilkinson, and we're going to be huge. So for me, it was actually a little bit like the opposite with my mindset. It was like, all right, let's make this attainable. Let's make this longevity.
Yeah.
So going in, like I had massive dreams, massive vision. Still believe God's going to do that, and we're going to see that, which I'm pumped for. Like I'm keen to see like, you know, schools ministries come out of our youth ministry, which I haven't really seen in the past. And, you know, but for me, my main goal, my main purpose is to create a place, create an environment where kids can encounter God. Because you can make a fun place, you can do family and all that, which is awesome. But if they're not encountering God, then you're missing the point, in my opinion. I mean, to be honest, that's the truth. For me, my biggest worry going in is, for me, I'm quite a strong personality. So serving under someone is quite easy for me to not be too domineering, because, you know, you just do what they say, and that's quite easy. But going into, I was probably worried that my personality would come across as domineering, which is not at all effective or good leadership. So, you know, my biggest worry with that, you know, I'd be coming across as like arrogant or prideful, which is not at all what we want. So it was me. So that was conversations with people. How do you go about leading effectively? How do you go about leading a team meeting? How do you go about mentoring other leaders? And, you know, there was heaps of good input from different people, but like, you know, asking them questions, listen more, all those sort of things, make their opinions heard, which helped me along with it. But that was probably my number one worry. But it's been good. It's been crazy 10 weeks, but it's been awesome.
And props to you, man. Like you said, first 10
weeks.
Yeah,
doing a good job, bro.
And like you're thrown into a lot, because a lot of youth ministries, which you've noticed, and I think it's awesome. One of the benefits of this pandemic is that everyone's had to innovate and create. And I've done a couple of podcasts talking about it already. But it's actually a good, I mean, it doesn't feel like a good thing if you're a leader in the middle of it, but it is a good thing. And I think props to you, because there's a lot of youth ministries that don't have as strong as an online presence as what they did before this. And you've just been thrown right in the middle of it and gone, hey, innovate, create, be unique, as well as building on your leadership team and your young people, which is not like that's not all the things that people should have to focus on all at the one time. And so I think you've done really well so far to come into that. So I appreciate you being vulnerable about those worries and strategies. But yeah, Dave, a year and a half or so in, Nelly, year and a quarter, go back a year and a quarter ago to you've just moved from the Goldie. You're under, Bishop Thomas Otto up there on the Goldie. You've come down to
Rev.
Yeah, you've come down to Melbourne to Uni Hill and under Charles, which is our national youth leader, legend. What's your strategy? What's your mindset going into that? What are you thinking? What are you worried about? Let us know.
Oh, bro, like everything. I'm worried about everything. I'm thinking about everything. But no, I mean, for me, I was probably, that's kind of like what you said at the start. I was probably a little bit too much like ultra aggressive, almost like too positive, if I can kind of say that, in terms of, like Dan said, you want to see, let's get 1,000 by week 3 and like,
let's go.
Like revival next week and all that sort of stuff. And like you just kind of have all these expectations and you kind of, you see the platform and you see the position and like all that sort of stuff. And then when you get there, for me anyway, like when I moved and I start actually working and you're going into church and you're a part of a team and ministry and things, you realize that the reality is a little bit different. Things are a little bit harder and it's more of a grind. So, I mean, for me, my mindset is like pretty similar to Dan's. I just wanted to get in and turn the place upside down and those sorts of things. So, yeah, I was probably pretty almost too aggressive in terms of like probably bringing change. I probably brought some things in too quick, went a bit hard at some things I probably should have left alone at the beginning.
Yeah, right.
It's like, I'm blessed that it's all right. Like, nothing really happened. I didn't have anything blow up as such, but I look back now and I'm like, I definitely could have handled a lot of situations better. And I think probably, I just probably wish I had had a little bit more of a grip on like the reality of what I was walking into. And probably my biggest worry actually is like how do I actually lead? If kind of that makes sense. Like I'm trying to figure myself out. Like, do I actually lead in the way that I think I do? Or like, do I come across kind of like what Dan said, do I come across to people in a totally different light that isn't my heart, but it's kind of the way that I'm communicating? So, and I guess ultimately, if like, I'm probably just worried about failure, like just worried about,
for sure.
Okay, I'm new and I've got like lots of my friends have been in this role before, like, and done this and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, even the guy who ran the youth before me, Geordie, shout out to George, he like one of my good friends, and like you want to continue to carry on what they've built. And the worry of, am I like going to do a good job? Am I going to be able to be who I want to be and who these people need? I'm probably just worried about failure is probably a pretty big one for me anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I think both of you have kind of touched on very similar things. Can I just be real for a second? I mean, for me, I took over a youth ministry 5 years ago, and I'm no longer in that particular role at the moment. I've stepped out. I'm in young adults, and so I can think about it a little bit differently than what I did before. But for me, 1 second, I'm going to edit this out. Give me 2 secs. The dog's going mental.
That's hilarious, bro.
Cool, I'm back. Yeah, look, for me, I think one of the things that was interesting is that, like, I've learned now on the other side of it that going into it 100%, like all this energy, is actually not a bad thing. And I think in the middle of it, even if you're a year in or you're 10 weeks in, when I've asked you these questions to reflect on it, and maybe if someone's listening right now, you're about to go into it and you're like, should I be going this hard? Or I went this hard for 6 weeks and nothing's happened. What we often do is we base our amount of energy and our amount of dreaming on the results instantly, which is actually not a very healthy thing to do, because if we're basing the amount of dreaming that we put into it on the results that are happening, it means that the effects of that, the success is on us as well as the failure on us, which is not the way that God intended it. It's actually supposed to be, hey, I'm going into it with dreams that God gave me. It's a God dream. And I'm going to lay that down. And if God chooses to bless that, then God chooses to bless that. But I'm going to go into it doing what he's given me to do, which is be obedient and actually just use what's in my hand. And so you've got unique young people in your guys' two youth ministries that I will never touch for the most part, because I don't live in those cities. But you've been given them, and you've been given the skills that you have, and the mind for the word maybe that Dan possesses a little bit, hungrier in that area than some of us are. It's like you can use that to ability that maybe I can't. And so it's like I had to learn those things as I went along. But I appreciate you guys being raw, but it's also amazing that like the level, and it's interesting that you both said it, how hard we go, which I think everybody does. And then we look back on it and we're like, maybe I shouldn't have gone that hard. And it's like, well, you did what you thought was right at the time. And as long as you were centered on God, and I think it was like, it was always going to be successful in what God deems a success. So, but yeah, the second question, or the second topic I want to get into a little bit is what's been your biggest struggle so far? And you kind of both touched on it a little bit, whether it be, hey, I've gone this hard, and maybe the biggest struggle is coronavirus for Dan. I don't know, but probably. But maybe just talk into that, and maybe we can just have a quick discussion on like, what are the struggles of a new role? Is it, is it leadership? Is it different leaders that are older than you? Is it young people? Is it having a presence on social media? Like, it could be any of these things that we want to talk about. But Dave, I'll throw over to you first for this one. Maybe just talk about, hey, what were my struggles? What have I found difficult so far?
Yeah. I don't think of things I haven't struggled with. But I mean, practically for me, I like things like admin, like paperwork, the books, all those sorts of things. Like, I just so bad at that. Like, naturally not who I am as a person. And yeah, great with an idea, not great with the practical side of the idea. So I hugely struggled with that. And then, I mean, when I moved, the team that like kind of I was leading, I was the youngest person on the team. Yeah. So that was a real interesting dynamic to try and like lead people, especially as the new guy. You're the new guy and you're the young guy. And so that was like just real interesting trying to figure that whole thing out at the start. And then I guess for me, like I said before, what kind of leader am I? I mean, I'm still trying. I don't know if you ever stop trying to figure that out, but I probably thought I was one way at the start, and now I look back and think I'm actually probably pretty different to that. So yeah, I mean, that stuff was really tough at the start, and just kind of your impressions. Like I said, I'm really close with Geordie, who's in before me, and we lead so differently to each other. So I'm kind of stepping into the environment and then looking around and saying like, oh, they know him so well and love him so well. They don't really know me at all. And so it's kind of like, it's a big shake-up, and trying to handle that and see how those things go. But that stuff was big for me in terms of, I was just so young in comparison to everyone around me. So, yeah.
Which is good, because there's probably people listening to this that are young. And I don't think that, and again, the topic of discussion on today's podcast is stepping into a new leadership role. We want to clarify again, that doesn't necessarily mean youth pastor like these two, which is awesome. And maybe you are. It could mean, hey, you've been given to oversee senior high boys, and that's like in your youth ministry, and that's your new leadership role. And you might be sitting here recognizing with Dave that you're like, hey, I'm only 18, I'm in this new role or whatever. I feel super young. How do I do that? And I appreciate you being vulnerable with that, because for me, when I took over the youth, I was 20 at our youth ministry, and 100%, I had leaders on my team that were 32, 33, all those kinds of stuff. And it was a struggle. Like, it was tough, because they were leaders when I was in grade 8 or grade 9. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so then I'm taking over them and now leading them. And it's like, what we don't often understand also is that leadership that's been spiritually ordained, if we're just talking, specifically spiritual right now, you got to trust your senior pastor's direction. And if they've put someone like you two in a position of leadership spiritually, there's a certain authority that comes with that, and a weight, which maybe we'll touch on in a moment, that is often difficult to handle and a burden you have to carry. But at the end of the day, although teams are difficult to manage, the more that you maneuver through that, you'll actually find that the team that you need to go forward in the future will begin to form itself over that time, as long as you continue to be humble and present yourself to God. Because I had people on my team, like I said, that were older, and realistically, they were never going to be there 5 years down the track. And some of them I kind of wish just left in the first 6 months, and not because they're bad people, but because they weren't ever going to be there, but they were almost staying out of like respect to me and all that
Yeah.
stuff, which was awesome. They're legends. But in some ways, when you inherit a team, you're borrowing someone else's team for like a year and a half. And then over time, you kind of find a team that becomes your own. And so it is a difficult thing to manage and that you can struggle with. Do you want to add anything else to that, Dave? Or that's all good from you?
Yeah. All good, bro. Like, I totally agree with what you said. Like, and I mean, like you said, we might touch on it a little bit later on, but kind of walking in your authority that you've been given. I mean, to be honest, if you can grab a hold of that early on, you'll it's so helpful and makes things so much easier. It takes put pressure on yourself to please people when don't really have to carry that around. So totally agree with that. It's awesome.
Sure. Dan, over to you, man. Any struggle? I mean, 10 weeks. Let's talk about the struggles. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So we're a city centre church in Geelong, and we have a lot of kids coming from the community. In all honesty, we don't really know how they came to be with us. We're so blessed to have them.
Awesome.
But we also have a lot from low socioeconomic areas. And with that, I think every week this term, I've dealt with something pretty full on in terms of mental health, a lot of mental health stuff, just had breakdowns and stuff on Friday nights, really dysfunctional families. I think I've called every department of the government already, from the popos to Department of Human Services. It's been a crazy 10 weeks. But for me, that's been gnarly. But for me, probably the biggest struggle is not doing everything. I'm a bit of a perfectionist myself. I set a really high standard. So I want the social media to be popping. I want the preacher to be unreal. I want the MC to be unreal. I want everything to be perfect. And for me, it takes a lot of effort to be you do this, you run with it, and whatever happens. For me, that's really, really hard. Because they got to do it different because everyone has different flavors. And for me, learning, hey, that's all right. My team will go do it different. That's fine. So learning to let those sort of things go, and understand that it's my job not to expect perfection straight away, but to help them grow into a place that's excellent. And I think what's really cool, Ruth Swift, my old senior pastor, or still senior pastor actually,
current senior pastor,
current, she came with me to Geelong. Excellence isn't about perfection. Excellence is about doing everything you can to do the best we can, and that's what we're always striving for. So that's for me, I've got to be really intentional with my team. That's we don't strive for perfection, we strive for excellence. That doesn't mean you're going to be great. It doesn't even mean you could be average. You could be below average and still excellent, because it's what you're capable of. So just learning that different people, different capacity. You got to set your expectations realistic. And, so for me, that's probably has been the biggest struggle is, letting things go, letting things not be perfect for the sake of someone else's growth. But, it's all a journey, and it's all about growing them and growing the ministry, because it's not about Dan Powell ministry. It's about, Waterfront Youth, and then, the greater kingdom outside of that.
Yeah, brilliant. I appreciate you being honest and real, man. It's awesome. I think that that is, for many leaders, that's a real struggle going on. I need to be the best in the game at this, and social media and the preaching, and and at the end of the day, whether you are a volunteer youth pastor or leader or any sort of ministry role here listening, or you're full time, there is never going to be enough hours in the day to be the best at all those things. And I think that's can we just get that out there on the podcast right now? You are never ever ever gonna have enough hours to be the perfect person at every single one of those areas. And I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I took on any form of ministry was what's more important for you as a leader is finding out the things that you're weakest at, rather than focusing on the things that you're strong at. Not that the things that you're strong at aren't great. You'll find those out and you'll run with them because you're good at them anyway. So if it's social media, you'll run with that because you're gifted at that and you'll do it. By having people that are, good at the things that you're weak at around you and your core team or your intimate circles of leadership, they'll then be able to lift you up in the areas that you struggle the most in. And so it's one of the things that I had to learn really early on is going and look, it takes a while because you do kind of go, I'm the leader. I have to do this and I have to do that. And then you're I suck at that and I'm terrible at this and I'm not good at creativity, which I wasn't. And so I had to get people around me that were, to kind of go, there's more to youth ministry than me just laying hands on a kid and them going under in the Holy Spirit, which is amazing. And that's super crucial to a youth ministry and growing it. But we also want to see high schools be impacted because they're attracted to our social media game and to our atmosphere and to the things that are happening in the foyer and like all the things that I just didn't care about at that point, because I was like, they're going to be transformed by the power of God, which is super true. But at the end of the day, like you said, a community kid that comes in doesn't give a stuff about the power of God at that point, because they haven't been connected in relationship with the leader. So, I might just, before we move on to the last question, which is just a bit of advice for those that are about to step into a new role, I might just quickly touch on two quick things, and we don't want to spend ages on it, but just maybe both of you give a quick comment on it. Two of the things that I found I struggled with the most when I stepped into a new role, number one was spiritual weight, which we kind of mentioned. I remember my first night of youth, I had ran events, I had led things because I'd had this transitional period of running youth ministry, and I'm sitting in the car with my then fiance Layla, and we're getting ready to go into youth ministry and to do the things that we need to do. And I remember sitting there and I remember going, the weight was just so overwhelming for me at that point. And I remember just breaking down and crying because there was all these kids that depended on me. There was all these leaders that were depending on me. And I was ready for the physical side of youth ministry and running it. I wasn't ready for the spiritual side of it. And so that was something that I had to learn as I went along on the journey. And the other thing was this sort of focus or concern with numbers. Is like, I just want to comment on that really quickly. Hey, you know, when people go into it and go, I've got to get X amount of young people to be deemed successful. And that kind of like that pressure that puts on you as a leader to run with that. So do either of you want to just quickly touch on that before we go on to the third question?
Yeah. So for me, the numbers game, for me going into ministry, I was very adamant I wouldn't be worried about it. Because, you know, you get all this advice. And to be honest, the first term I've been fine. But now going online where you can literally see the number of people watching a stream go from 35 to 33 to 32. And instead of a kid, you know, watching a phone on your service, you're literally seeing the numbers drop. I've noticed that, you know, I'm focusing on that. It's just like a constant drawing myself back. You know, if we're seeing one kid impacted by what we're sharing now, then that's a win. And it doesn't matter if you're missing out on the rest. It's about, you know, the one in reality.
Great.
And then in terms of the spiritual warfare stuff, it's huge. It's like, I think as Christians probably underestimate or undercompensate for what it is in reality. But I just do what I always do. Like, you know, if I'm praying or saying I pray. And so it's just starting every service with prayer and, you know, being real direct about, you know, calling things out, praying over yourself, getting people to pray over you.
Great.
And then just talking to your oversight, talking to your pastor about things you're struggling with and getting them to pray with you. I think it's huge.
Brilliant. Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, like exactly the same as Dan in terms of like numbers for me. I probably said I wasn't going to care at the start, but secretly did. And like kind of went the opposite way in terms of like now I basically force myself to not bother looking. Obviously, like we record who comes on a Friday and those sorts of things.
Safety, right.
Yeah, exactly right. But like in terms of however many people come, I had a bit of a moment probably after a youth night where I was just absolutely shattered at kind of the way that the night had gone down. And I was just sitting in my car and like felt God basically say like that wasn't really my job. And I had to leave that up to him and kind of hit me and it hurt because I was like, no, but like I lead this. And then God basically just was like, well, you don't. So, that was that was, you know, a good lesson to learn at the time. And I'm glad that it happened pretty early on. But that sort of stuff is a constant struggle. You just got to keep taking it to God, let God take a control of that. And same with the spiritual stuff that Dan said, like discipline's probably the big one in terms of like I just feel like if I'm not disciplined in, you know, spending time with God or reading the word or prayer or those sorts of things, getting around someone who's kind of ahead of the steps I'm at, you know, that stuff's super important for me to help me stay, you know, if I get out of a rhythm or out of my, you know, discipline, then everything kind of starts to be affected by that. So I think discipline's huge. Spiritual disciplines, yeah. Yeah,
that's really good, actually. It's so good. But yeah, I appreciate that from you too. I think that's just some insight there for some people that are in that mindset at the moment of worrying about those things. And if you are listening or watching this, can I just say, like, from the three of us, as clearly as possible as we can get across, if you have a youth night or if you're running a team or whatever it may be, and in 1 week to the next, you drop by half of that in numbers, you're still the leader that your church and God has ordained to be in that position. and that doesn't change that perspective. And I just want to make that really clear, because you might be sitting there listening to this going, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not talented enough. You aren't, but God put you there anyway. And so while you're in the position, use what you can to actually allow God to change the lives of young people or young adults or whatever it may be, and actually build the kingdom with the place you've been put in to do so.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. So last question I want to get into before we get into some rapid fire stuff to end the podcast. If you guys could give one piece of advice to someone stepping into a new leadership role, just kind of like, I know we've talked about a lot and we may be overlapping a little bit, but one piece of advice that you could give to someone who's just about to step into it. You're sitting down, you're having a coffee with them. What's the piece of advice you're going to give them? Dan, I'll throw it over to you first. What do you reckon?
Yeah. So probably my number one piece of advice is ask heaps of questions.
Right.
3 different people to ask questions of. Be like, one, probably the most important, the person you're taking over from. So Johnny led the ministry before I did. He was and still is the associate pastor of my church.
Love Johnny.
And the weeks leading up to our kind of first meeting, phone call, whatever, I was writing every question I could think of down in a OneNote, and I ended up having 3 A4 pages worth of notes. Ask about the team, ask which the team members annoy them, what's the triggers of the team, who works well together, who doesn't work well together. Ask those things, ask about all the programs they're running. So for me, I was coming into a team that I wasn't a part of, and it was the same for Dave. So I didn't know where the culture was at. I didn't know what the youth was excelling at, what they were weak at. So, I was asking heaps of questions of Johnny, and then the same for your team as well. I was very intentional to make sure I met up with all my team individually even before our first team meeting. Mostly, honestly, they were just for relational catch-ups, figure out where they're at, what their life's like, let them get to know me. But then also, I did ask some basic questions about, what do you enjoy about youth? What do you not enjoy about youth? And it gives you that opportunity to hear perspectives on a ministry you really don't have a clue about. So you can go into it with as much information as humanly possible, and set yourself up for a win, essentially.
Yeah, great.
And then just ask questions of people who've already done it. Get around other youth pastors if you're going to, if you become a youth pastor. If you're, going to business, ask other people in business, what do they do well? What hasn't gone well for them? Get as much information is key, I think, in everything. So I think, spend as much time you can with that.
Great advice. Yeah. Dave, any advice from you?
I actually think I'm going to steal something from you, Caleb, essentially.
Let's go.
But
go for it.
I remember like kind of Dan said, I asked a few guys some questions before I got into the game. And probably one of the biggest ones that stuck with me was like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So take it slow and steady, and work like what Dan said. It's all about people. It's all about relationship. And don't forget that no matter how, even if 100 do walk through in week 2, don't forget the fact that it's still all about people and God's still all about relationship. That's really a huge one that, for me. And I guess the other thing too is that, things don't happen overnight. And so I remind myself every day. So, things don't happen overnight, and it takes time, and, you've got to build, things don't just, come together overnight while you're asleep. It's, you got to build stuff, and it takes time. So yeah, marathon.
Appreciate the shout out, bro. It actually was my advice I was going to give. So you just spoke it straight out of my mouth.
Stolen.
Yeah, but one of the things I'll add really quickly before we get into rapid fire, if you are listening to this and you're taking on a new role, 3 things to focus on. Focus on culture. So if you're going to build culture into youth ministry, it's one of those words that are thrown around. But I guess it's like, what do you want your youth ministry or your business or your whatever it is you're building into? What do you want it to look like, and what do you want people to know it for? And so build into that. So if you want to be a Holy Spirit-centered youth ministry, then build into that. If you want to be this youth ministry, then build into that. So build your culture, build your team. One of the biggest struggles for me was going from the mindset of my focus is on year 10 boys year group to now my focus is on building and mentoring my leadership team. So I was so focused on young people for so long into my youth leadership role that I didn't realize that I was doing all the things that I should have been delegating to my other leaders to do. And I was focusing so much on trying to just get all the young people to love me all the time. Whereas I should have been getting my leaders around me and building a relationship with them and actually giving them weight over so they could do the things they were called to do. So, build your culture, build your youth team or your team around you, and then just build your relationship with God and your foundation stronger, because you're going to need it the longer you get in. So like David's hinted at, leadership development doesn't end, and I could be 75 and I'm still trying to build the type of leader that I am and do the things that I'm doing. So we're going to end the podcast by doing some rapid fire questions that are just a bit of fun, talking about, at the end of the day, we're in isolation of some kind at the moment. So we got a lot of time to read, listen, think about things. And so I want to ask our guests as they come on the Check-In podcast a couple of questions to end. So we might do this separately. I've worked out so we can get each guy answering their answers to the same questions. We'll start off with Uni Hill representative Melbourne, and we'll ask the 4 questions straight up, and you can just answer them really quickly, really rapid fire, and then we will end the podcast and wrap up. So David, here's our rapid fire questions on the Check-In. Number 1 is, what are you currently reading or listening to while in isolation?
Not much of a reader, but I am reading at the moment Barbarian Way, it's called, The Barbarian Way by Erwin McManus. It's a book about having crazy faith, uncivilized faith. It's sick. It's really good. And what am I listening to? I'm listening to, shout out to J. Cole, Sideline Story, taking it back, early 2010s. Just bit of early J. Cole Sideline Story, and I'm all about that at the moment, actually.
Great. J. Cole, shout out, come on the pod. I don't know what we talk about, but come on the pod.
Why not? Hip-hop, bro.
Second question. Any other churches, like podcasts that you listen to regularly, just so people that maybe haven't heard of it or don't listen to that podcast? What are some sermons or churches that you're listening to regularly?
Yeah, look, Wake and Nights podcast. I don't know if you know about that one, but that's up there on the list.
Shout out.
I don't know if it counts as a podcast in terms of like it's just him preaching, but I mean, Church Home, Judah Smith, Jensen Franklin, those sorts of guys. I just like listening to guys, particularly those two, on podcasts, like, Tuesday on my way into work, those sorts of things.
Yeah, great.
Just love listening to those guys, really.
Yeah, awesome. Question number 3. You're, kind of locked into Melbourne or Uni Hill at the moment. The international travel bans are, there are restrictions on them, but if you could plan a top travel destination right now, where are you going? Where are you flying to? Where are you driving to? Where are you going?
I'd fly to Canada. Actually, I really want to go to Canada.
There you go.
I would have said Japan, but I went to Japan. So, Canada.
The old world traveler right here.
Yeah.
Would have to Japan, into Japan.
Just had to flex.
Sorry, mate. Sorry that you had the sushi and you ran with the monkey and the deers in Tokyo or whatever.
It was hard, bro. It was hard.
Taking on the Mario Kart around the street. Sorry, man. Some of us stuck in Wollongong. I didn't understand. Last question. Maybe you want to give a quick shout out to, the best coffee or food destination in your area, your city, whatever it is. If someone's coming to Melbourne, we'll go Melbourne as a whole, but you can limit it as much as you want. Where are you taking them for coffee or lunch?
I've taken you there. I take everyone that comes. Dan may have been there. I say Unilab because I got to show love. Unilab's literally like 200 meters from church. So I got to say Unilab Coffee Roasters, Bundoora, get around it. But my favorite one is just around the corner from my house, in a place called Montmorency, and it's called Stone's Throw Cafe, and they do the best iced lattes. So if you come to Melbourne and you message me, I'll take you there.
Wow. Shout out to Stone Throws. We'll get you on the podcast at some point.
Yeah, let's go.
Great rapid fires. Dan, we're going to throw it over to you. Your rapid fires. What are you currently reading or listening to in isolation?
Yeah, so I got a couple of books on the go. We're reading 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. I don't know how to say it. That's the one. And then Spiritual Leadership, which everyone should read if you're going to ministry. It's sick, by J. Oswald Sanders. Really good. Then listening. I don't know. I assume you mean podcast. So I'm going to go with that.
Podcast, whatever. Yeah.
Not J. Cole.
J. Cole.
Taylor Swift.
Yes, another reference.
Yeah, let's go. Craig Gashel Leadership Podcast.
Right.
Must listen if you haven't listened to it. It's awesome. I love Chatty Beach Leadership Lean In. And then another one's a bit more meaty, the Kerry Newhoff Leadership Podcast, which is awesome. Right. Also awesome as well. So they're kind of a weekly listen for me. I'm slowly getting up to date, but they're awesome. There's heaps of them.
Great. Favorite other church you listen to frequently?
I'm the same as Dave. I love Church Home. I love Judah. He's my favorite preacher. And then I listen to a fair bit of VU with Rich Wilkinson.
Same.
But they're probably the top 2 at the moment.
Yeah, great. Top travel destination, where are you going if you can go on a plane or a car or a boat or a whatever, taxi?
Japan's
So I've already been to Japan and like, you know, travel. Nah, I haven't been to Japan. I'd love to go to New Zealand. I reckon that'd be sick.
I have been to New Zealand. So
Sorry.
Look at him. I got a Winnebago and drove around New Zealand or whatever with my friends.
Leave me alone, all right? Yeah,
cool.
No, New Zealand is beautiful. If you haven't been, go to New Zealand. But that's great. Good choice. Good choice. And last question, you're in Geelong. Best coffee or food shout out in your city?
Oh yeah, there's this cafe called 9 Grams in the city, and it's real good. Like nice coffee, good food, good staff, just nice vibes. I enjoy it there. So if you're coming for coffee from me, that's probably where you're heading, because I don't know anywhere else yet.
What a vibe. I will give a quick shout out to something in Geelong. When I was there in August, the great Johnny Kettle took us and the youth team to it seems to be a famous pizza place in Geelong that all the youth, is there a name for this place? What's it called?
Yeah, Pizza Land. It's the worst pizza. That was my first thing, taking over the ministry. We're never heading to Pizza Land again for after food hangs. It's just greasy and gross.
I was there, mate. Me and all the 45-year-old plus wogs in Geelong were hanging out at Pizza Land on the Friday night.
Every place has their dirty pizza joint, like everywhere.
Right. How long did you smell of garlic for afterwards, Kate?
Oh, heaps. I just smelled of garlic and uncooked ham for about 3.5 weeks. So fantastic. But anyway, thanks guys for coming on the podcast. We're going to wrap it up there. We appreciate both of you. If you want to check out their ministries, where can they find you? What's the Instagram handle for your youth ministries? Just a quick shout out.
Oh, good shout out. All right, mate, jump on Instagram, David Simpson. I don't even know what my handle is. David Simpson 7.
Yeah,
like that.
I think that's correct.
Instagram is probably the best place to see what I'm up to.
And your youth ministry? They want to have a look at your youth.
Rev Youth is the youth, and Rev Youth. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, basically YouTube. Most places you can check out stuff.
Great.
TikTok, bro. You on TikTok?
You got to be on TikTok.
I'm not on TikTok.
Come on, bro. Dan Powell, shout out your Instagram, your handle, your youth handle.
Oh, mine is Dan_Powell 1.
Great content.
Because without the number was taken. And then the youth is simply Waterfront Youth, no spaces, no nothing. We got that in.
Clean.
We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on
so clean.
Great. We appreciate you guys coming on. Hope all the listeners have had a great time. If you have any questions or requests for these two, please send them to our links, our YouTube comments, whatever you need to do, and we'll aim to get back to you as soon as possible. Have a great week, you two. Enjoy isolation. I look forward to seeing you as soon as we can. Take it easy, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, bro.